called birthright citizenship, and the fact that illegal aliens and tourists from China can come to the United States, have a baby, and then have an American citizen right away. Art, good to have you with us, sir.
Vince, thanks so much for having me again. Truly appreciate it.
Always love talking to you. And today, the reason we're chatting is because I know you've got some new data on just how big of a deal this is. How many, when illegal aliens are here, how many American citizens are being produced in those families each year?
So the center did a rough estimate of the number of U.S. births in 2023 to illegal alien parents, and we determined that 7% of all births that year, between 225,000 and 250,000 in total, were to parents who were unlawfully present in the United States. So it's a massive, it's a shocking number, honestly.
A
And
quarter
quite frankly,
million.
Vince, a quarter million, yeah, and I think it's only going to get worse because we know that more than 1 million migrants entered in what are called family units. That's when, adults enter with children, and a lot of those adults enter together. It's a couple with their kid. They get released in the United States. About 88.5% of all migrants were, slightly higher for those family units. So those folks are now living in the United States, building up equities, and one of those equities is United States citizen children. So, that just gives you an idea of how tough the task that
Yes.
Tom Homan and Stephen Miller have ahead of them.
So how is it, give us a better sense of this. How is it an equity to have a U.S. citizen child? What benefit does that provide to the illegal immigrant parents of that child?
So when it comes to things like prosecutorial discretion, bringing the case at all, or for any form of discretionary relief, and asylum is a form of discretionary relief, those equities count in the alien's favor when it comes time for the judge or the government to make determination. So, if they have a job, if they own a house, if they have a kid, all of those things are positive equities that count in the alien's favor.
So, meaning that we have traditionally, when this situation arises, judges typically err on the side of, well, let's not deport the parents because we have a U.S. citizen child involved. So let's try and figure out a way to make this good for the child.
Yeah, that's exactly how it goes. But keep in mind at the same time, Vince, that, Congress has also written a law so that, we anticipate that people are going to have kids here. That is one of the normal consequences of removal, that, if you get removed and you've, had a child in the United States, that's going to happen. So it is sort of a weak equity, but it's still a significant equity that you have to take into account in a closed case.
So when we use the term anchor baby, this is precisely what we're referring to.
Yeah, so when people refer to anchor babies, what they're talking about is, and it's not a term I use, but it is, one that people are familiar with.
Right.
They are talking about, having a child in the United States so that, one, it's an equity in case of removal, but, more importantly, when that child turns 21, that child can then petition for the parents to come to the United States. And from that point, we can petition for more, extended family, up to and including nieces and nephews.
Yes.
To come into the United States.
So,
it's a huge issue.
Art, is there ever a time where where you've got a situation like this and an immigration judge looks at it and says, well, yeah, there's a U.S. citizen child who was born here after they illegally immigrated, but I am going to deport the parents. I'm going to deport the whole family. And if the kid, when they're of age, when they're an adult, wants to come back, they're welcome to as a U.S. citizen. Does that ever happen?
Yeah, actually, in fact, Vince, there's an entire body of case law that surrounds exactly that. And, the attitude that case law, that precedent has is you have a choice. You can take that child with you, but if you claim that you're going to leave the child here, you also need to tell me who's going to take care of that child when you're removed.
Right.
So that's the way that it comes down. It's a pretty logical system. Immigration is generally logical when you enforce the law.
Yes. Okay. And so now President Trump has issued a controversial executive order dictating that he doesn't believe that the 14th Amendment was ever intended to be used in this way. And as we've been looking at it, he's not removing anybody's citizenship, but his goal is to say going forward that you can't just be an illegal immigrant and then suddenly give birth to an American citizen. Is that right?
Yeah, so the way that this order works is 30 days from the issuance of the order, and I think that's February the 16th or 18th, something like that. But 30 days from the issuance of the order, Social Security Administration, DOS, other agencies of the federal government are going to stop issuing documents showing that that individual is a United States citizen. So that child wouldn't get a Social Security number, wouldn't get a passport, things like that.
Yes.
That's the effective part of this. But the real reason, and nobody's told me this, but it's pretty clear from the order, they want to trigger the legal challenges, and there are 5 of them, currently going on in the courts to this order, because they want the Supreme Court to weigh in on the intent of the 14th Amendment, which states any person born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof is a citizen of the United States. And they really want to get that part, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, interpreted. The last case that, actually weighed in on the issue was in 1898. So, but, people may say, well, it's been, 126 years. Why are you revisiting the question now? And the reason is because of, the millions of people, the 10 million people who have entered the United States, under the Biden administration. This is, now a much larger issue than it was, back in the 90s when I started my immigration career, when almost everybody who came to the United States illegally was a single adult male from Mexico, and most of them were just turned around and sent back. This is a very different world. And when you talk about, 1.5 million aliens and family units, who were apprehended at the border and released into the United States, we're talking about, potentially 500,000 children, 6 or 7 years down the road that this may apply to. So it's better for the courts to actually weigh in on this now.
Right.
But in order to do that, they need a case or controversy.
So
and they're triggering that.
As you point out and know much better than I do, this is an area that is largely untested before the United States Supreme Court. In other words, there's a lot of space for interpretation as to how the 14th Amendment applies here. And if I understand correctly, that case you're referring to in 1898, United States versus Wong Kim Ark, it didn't involve someone who was here illegally, did it?
No, it involved a person who was the child of 2 19th century versions of green card holders, 2 permanent residents of the United States. And he was a Chinese national. He was born in San Francisco. He went to China. When he came back, they attempted to exclude him. And the justices of the Supreme Court, as a 5-4 decision, held that, he was, in fact, a citizen of the United States under the 14th Amendment. They actually went further than just that case. They said everybody, with the exception of specific Native Americans who was born here, were citizens. And in fact, in 1924, Congress passed the Indian Citizenship Act to address those people. But yeah. So the holding was much broader than the facts of the case, and in the law we refer to that as dicta. So that key part that everybody else who's born here, other than the kids of diplomats, are citizens, and the Indians, of course, are citizens. It's not actually valid law. I mean, it's the law,
yes,
but it is one that is subject to revisiting, which again is what the Trump administration is attempting.
And it seems like a pretty perverse way to interpret the intent of the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was was very famously passed in the wake of slavery, and it was designed to ensure that freed slaves, black Americans, were considered American citizens. That's the point of the 14th Amendment. It's not for Chinese foreign nationals to come here on a tourist visa, have a baby, and an American citizen by extension, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a very important point on that. You can come to the United States on a tourist visa in order to get medical treatment. If that medical treatment is, I'm pregnant and I'm going to give birth, is it appropriate to issue a visa to that person to come to the United States knowing that the child is going to be a United States citizen? Because the whole idea behind non-immigrant status, in a B2, a tourist visa is non-immigrant status, is that you're not planning on staying in the United States. You're planning on going back home to your unrelinquished domicile. So, this touches many different aspects of the law. But yes, in the when this was passed in 1868, it was to reverse the Dred Scott case, and it followed up on an earlier provision in the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which was written a little bit differently, but not, during floor debates, it wasn't supposed to be read differently. And that one said all persons born in the United States and not subject to any foreign power excluding Indians not taxed, are hereby declared to be citizens of the United States. So that is a little bit clearer on exactly the scenario you gave me. Those people are subject to a foreign power. People who come here illegally are subject to a foreign power. You know, so that's really the delta, and whether, Congress intended a change between 1866 and 1868, what that clause, that critical clause in the 14th Amendment means, that's really open for discussion.
Yes, and if we go back to the drafters of the 14th Amendment, even the authors were pretty clear, weren't they, about what they intended to do with this idea of birthright citizenship?
Yeah, and it's interesting because if we were to go back then and say, oh, by the way, there are 15 million illegal aliens in the United States, they would be gobstruck. Those are concepts that they couldn't really even understand. So and I'm sure that if they could, they probably would have addressed it a little bit more clearly than they had. We really didn't have large scale legal immigration in the United States until truly the 21st century,
Yes.
after we started cracking down. As recently as 2007, 90+% of all the people who were stopped at the southwest border were single adult males from Mexico coming to work. And if they got caught and turned around, they were just going to enter illegally anyway.
Yes, I know. It's so funny. I was just talking to a lefty the other day. He was like, Vince, why is Trump trying to change the interpretation of the 14th Amendment? I said, he's trying to restore it. He's trying to restore our understanding of the 14th Amendment. This is a big deal, and we should do it. At any rate, thank you for digging into the numbers. I can't even believe that 2023, 250,000 U.S. babies born to illegal aliens, according to Center for Immigration Studies data. That's a lot of people. Andrew Arthur, good to talk to you today, sir.